Amazing. Lovely. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully you can all see my screen. I am here to talk about making accessibility a team sport. So my name is Rachael Sutherland. I am the director of design at an agency called Manifesto. We build digital experiences and we specialize in the charity and fundraising sector, visitor attraction and higher education. But what I'm here to talk to you all about today is my role as an accessibility lead. So making accessibility a team sport has been a project of mine for the past 6 years, since the new legislation came in 2018. So I'm hoping to show you everything that I did and a much more succinct process for you all. And I'll try and squeeze that 6 years into 25 minutes. So please bear with me. So you can see that there's sort of 4 phases to what I've sort of created. I've done it in almost like a double diamond-esque theme. So if everyone knows what a double diamond is. So moving into sort of describing all of those phases. So starting with phase 1, which is going to be the beginning of you and your team discovering. So I find it really important to have an accessibility lead. That, as I explained, is my role. And at the beginning of the process, they need to understand the accessibility criteria and start to look at tools that you can use. Then going wider, looking at people within your organisation who have interest to create a working group, which I think I've just heard a few of you mentioning that you've got teams who share your learnings, and doing a bit of a gap analysis internally to see who doesn't know about accessibility. So you can start to write your accessibility playbook and your strategy. That's what your accessibility lead's going to do. They're going to oversee this program of work and ensure that you succeed. So, as I said, their first role is going to be to start understanding acceptance criteria. So often we all work to WCAG, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and we work to these 3 levels, which is A being the minimum requirement, AA recommended, and AAA is the highest. And how I started this journey was by plotting out all the acceptance criteria, who was accountable really for each, who might need to be informed, what it meant to me, not just understanding, what the WCAG rule was, but how it could actually work in the products and services that I was working in. And a bit more detail for the different capabilities, essentially. And it just started to make a bit more sense. And I've kept that up to date. It's a 6-year-old spreadsheet, and it's now got 2.2 criteria as well, and will be kept up to date with all new criteria coming. So automated tools are a great way to really quickly scan your sites. Often people will talk about Lighthouse scores, Google Lighthouse, and that is a great way to get a litmus test for how well your website, your product, or your services actually scores. But the 3 tools on the screen here are the tools that I commonly use to assess how well something we're making is actually looking. So my preference is always site improve, but I always like to use all 3, so I'm capturing any bug that they might throw up, and it's just more about personal preference. Site improve is my sort of go-to. Axe DevTools seems to be more something that developers are a little bit more comfortable with. But the automated tools can only pick up so much, and they're not going to pick up everything. So it's really important that we also test with assistive technologies. And it's an absolute must to experience what users are actually going to be experiencing when interacting with your website. So a screen reader, so you can, tab through the website and have everything sort of describe what they're seeing, so that links are actually helpful, buttons are described helpfully, etc., so that the user is getting the right context of what the page is trying to tell them. I always navigate through a website with a keyboard. I think it's also taught me to get in the habit of it anyway. Of course, it helps people with permanent barriers, but also people might have hurt an arm, so they might be using their keyboard, or it could be situational, etc. So making sure that any users can tab through the website, and giving them really strong cues to know where they are on your website. And I also like to check anything on my mobile to make sure that mobile users are getting the same experience as users who are more comfortable on their desktop. So make sure that nothing is hidden from the user. Working with real users is where I have actually learned the most, and it's incredible to see how different users interact with your website. And on the right is an example of someone who we've put an alt tag on an image, but actually this user finds the alt description is actually hindering their experience, and actually that image was much more decorative than maybe the content editor thought. And so that's why it's important to test with real users. You may have followed the WCAG criteria, but actually it wasn't working in this instance. So just understanding real life experience and seeing how people interact is a really good way to do that, and validate all of the decisions that you've made throughout the process. Amazing. So you might have team members working in silos, so different teams know different amounts about accessibility. You may have teams that actually know absolutely nothing. And what's really important with the gap analysis is that you bring everyone along on that journey. So if everyone in every capability within your team is thinking about accessibility at all points of the process, then implementing accessibility is going to be much easier. And so in creating your accessibility champion team who can concentrate on training as a small group, and then they can take their learnings and sort of take it into their own peer group. So that could be one designer or a couple of designers are part of the champions, and what they learn they take into their design community of practice, and they're upskilling all of the designers so everyone has the same amount of knowledge. And it's really important to use your accessibility community of practice to share all your learning. So as a designer, if I've learned something, I still need all of the developers and the QA testers to know all of the same information. So for example, I present and train everyone in the agency on how to use the assistive tools and technologies to make sure that they know how that works. But also, these are all videos now that we can show all of our new starters, so everyone has the same amount of knowledge. So from phase one, from finishing your discovery, you now know more about accessibility. You have an accessibility lead and a group of champions who are going to champion accessibility within the agency, and not just having one person do all of that heavy lifting. And you now know the gaps within the team, and so you're starting to get a plan of what you need to do. So now that you're defining more about your accessibility journey, you can start to think about goals, actionable goals, the timelines that you're going to work towards, and those, and really importantly, having some milestones that you can track against. It's a great point to learn more by conducting an accessibility audit and then fixing all the issues. So you're going to create a really great baseline. And so you should, when you're looking at the goals, not just thinking about what something like WCAG tells you to do, but like thinking a bit bigger about, you know, what goals that you want to achieve. It could be that you want to have all users, you know, you never get a complaint from your accessibility statement or something like that. And thinking about how you're going to achieve some of the things that I'm talking to you about. And some of these goals can be quite big. One of the goals, an example goal on the right, would be conducting your own accessibility audit of a product or service that you're currently working on. So define what your audit looks like. Document your findings, prioritize all those fixes. So it might be you're finding AAA issues, but you're not going to fix them at this stage. and you can plan how you're going to follow up all of the those edits. So accessibility isn't a one and done project. So you don't just do your audit or do those goals. It is about a cultural shift. So once you've set your initial goals, it's great to map out how you're going to realistically, achieve that. This is about spanning years and not weeks. So after you've gone through that research phase, you can concentrate on fixing some of those issues. So in that goal one, we would work in manifesto. Personally, we would go into like an agile way of working, and we might fix the issues that we found in a couple of sprints. And then now that we've created a really great baseline, we can concentrate on those bigger goals, be really aware of what can work in tandem. We don't have to just do one goal by one, etc. And as I think I've said a couple of times, you can learn so much by actually conducting an audit yourself as a team, and running through the tools and assistive technologies that we've discussed is a great way to pick up on a lot of the issues on your website. Obviously, test with real users. And what is great about doing the fixes in an accessibility audit is that you are going to improve your code, and that means you're going to improve the performance of your website, and then you're also going to have an impact on your carbon footprint. So all of these things are beautifully intertwined, which is really helpful, and you can really see a return on that investment. So it's great to log all of those issues in a report, and then you can also describe, as you start to know more. I also get the champions to describe the solution to help our developers, and also our developers are then learning from doing the fixes, which is great. So at the end of phase 2, you've got accessibility goals, you've audited, so you're learning so much more already, and you're fixing the issue, so you're going to create a baseline. And so what you can do before you start doing the fixes is look at how maybe your bounce rate in your Google Analytics, how many tasks are actually getting completed, so that once you've made all of those fixes, you can see the improvements. And so now in phase 3, you're going to develop your accessibility approach and processes, and make sure that accessibility is really embedded. Your champions are obviously always upskilling and understanding more. And then it's important to constantly learn, because I'm still learning things that I thought was the best way to do it, and actually I'm learning more, and all of that needs to get distilled back into your teams. So throughout the process, each member needs to play their part. And really, we start this from the very beginning of any kind of project. So this is more of like a client-based project, but internal, you would also need to go through this process. So delivery managers and client services need to start the conversation with clients early and gauge what level of accessibility the project needs to be, and also give them advice on, and working with the project team, give them advice on what they can achieve with the brief, essentially. If it's a reskin, obviously you're a bit more limited. And make sure that all of the workshops and ceremonies that you're going to have with your client are accessible. And obviously helping everyone at all times, and making sure you're crafting those workshops and meetings to the people who will be joining it. Now we're going to be ramping up the accountability. So your UX and UI teams, they need to apply inclusive principles throughout all of their thinking, when they're thinking about a range of users from the outset. So they're considering keyboard navigation, how it's going to look for us and work for screen readers, low vision users, etc., and not just how it is for a mouse user. And so that's thinking about color contrast, so making sure that we're hitting the right aspect ratios, focus states, target sizes, and also the UX team ensuring that everything's in a logical order, the right hierarchy between UX and UI, making sure that we're being helpful with instructions and error messaging, and basically trying to make the site as usable as possible. And one of the most important things that I found about this stage is collaboration with the development team. So if we're writing acceptance criteria, we're adding the accessibility thoughts that we've had to streamline the process, and obviously the development team will also be implementing, their knowledge. Obviously, the developers need to use the right HTML elements and make sure that they are writing semantic code. That's really important. Ensure that we're thinking when we're making components, that we're considering where it will sit in the page, so that we are using the right heading levels, that we use ARIA responsively and correctly. And what we have is the developers testing at a component level, so that we're picking up on the issues as quickly as we can, because retro fixing is obviously a bit harder. And having that back and forth conversation with the designers, actually the thing that you've designed here is going to compromise our accessibility. So sometimes you need to maybe adjust the thought process there. And then in a project, our last line of defense, as I like to call them, is our QA team. So they will also be testing at a component level, but also making sure that they've got a really clear test strategy for how they're going to test accessibility, and then they can report on the issues they're having. What we've also done in this process is, if a QA member or a developer is seeing the same issues within the team, we're taking that back into our communities and practice and saying, actually, we're commonly seeing this error being made, so can we please all start to think about that? And then it's our job to make a really robust CMS, so that we take away quite a lot of the responsibility from the content editors, and that's really important to me. And so actually, when it comes to the clients adding content, they only have to think about the hierarchy of the fonts in like a WYSIWYG. They don't need to worry about the title of a component, because we've already done all of that thinking. And so at this point, it's just adding meaningful alt text and thinking about really helpful links and descriptions. No one likes a read more. And also, when you've done all this great work and you want to shout about it, you need to make sure that your marketing team are also, walking the walk as well. And we have some real pros who have also provided me with some great advice that I can share today as well. So these are the tips that we try to live by. So a great way to interact and talk to your audience is capturing videos. We've certainly done that a lot this week about the Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And so we in our videos, we're making sure that there are captions. In the hashtagging, we are using camel case or Pascal case, which also helps if you've got a couple of words that together actually make a rude one. And also, when we add images and descriptions, we are adding alt text to those posts. So the alt text to the image, but also a description in the post, as being as helpful as we can, and using emojis mindfully. So I've put the image under the wrong point because I'm silly. But here you can see that RNIB have made a really good point here with this post, that if you use emojis, in a silly way, then for a screen reader, they hear this clapping hands, is clapping hands, what clapping hands, etc. I won't keep on saying clapping hands to you all. But yeah, using emojis are a great way to bring attention to things, but also it can create quite a frustrating experience for others. And avoid using third parties for formatting text. And so moving on, so also, as I said, always learning. There's always new criteria and legislation. So as I said before, in 2018, There was new legislation for public sector websites to be accessible. So that's when I decided, well, that can happen to any website, that could open up to more websites. And I think it's making sure that we are future proofing the products and services that we're making now. And as we all know, that in 2025, the European Accessibility Act is coming, and we need to make sure that we are joining in that movement, because the same legislation will be coming to the UK, I'm sure of it. And if you're making a product or service that is also being used by someone in the EU, then they're going to expect a higher level of accessibility. And so why not join the movement? And although they both specified 2.1, it's always really good. I always work to 2.2 because that's obviously also future proofing. I mean, I think it's main criteria now. So A criteria was created, 4 AA and 3 AAA. And most of the tools are including checking for those. But if you read through them and get to know those criteria, actually, they're quite easy to look out for. And so at the end of phase 3, you have a clear accessibility approach, and it's starting to get ingrained in all of your processes, because we've talked about what each team member can do. And if you have more team members, of course, they have to understand their own sort of responsibility. You've got a team of accessibility champions who are really starting to, talk to everyone, and they're always learning and improving. So now we need to measure the success, support the champions and giving them space, continue to learn and develop, and then share and create your playbook, which actually you should be creating throughout this whole process. So measuring success, I've done an example of a measurement on the right, having a lighthouse score that's obviously much higher than the original 78, if that was just as an example. But also, I think it's something I've been much more fascinated with at the moment, not just looking at like a lighthouse score, but have you created less friction points in the website? Are you getting better feedback from users? Have you reduced the number of issues that you're reporting on when you're testing? And because you created that baseline at the beginning, now looking at how many actions are completed, are they getting completed in a much more sort of meaningful way, and really seeing the impact that you've created is obviously the reason we do it. So now that you have your champions, it's important that you continue to invest in their learning. So give them time and space to continue their learning and focus on accessibility work. Give them more learning opportunities, send them to training. I mean, I guess that's why a lot of people are here today, to learn more. Connect with peers. I'm always free for a cup of coffee if anyone ever wants to have a chat. And I've spoken to a lot of people in the industry, and I've learned a lot from my peers. And celebrate your team who are really engaging and learning about accessibility. It's really important. And in that continue and learn development, reflect on each project is one of my most important things to do. So capture the lessons that you've learned that are specific. It may not be specific to the project, but something that you've learned about accessibility, and let that roll through the teams as I've been describing. Let all the accessibility champions know, and they can take that and roll that through your teams to make sure that everyone knows. Share external resources. This is what we use Slack. This is what our Slack channel is constantly doing. We're always sharing new resources, new thinking, more information about accessibility. Challenge and support each other. So I constantly, if I'm designing something, I don't know all the answers, so I might screenshot the design and post it on the channel. And I want feedback from the team to say, actually, that's not accessible. Have you thought about this? And we support each other, making sure that what we're doing is accessible. And that can also be from a developer's point of view. I'm using Focus. Should I use Focus Visible? And then they can get lots of advice from their teammates. And regularly reviewing and tracking against those goals that you made. I'm currently getting towards the end of some goals that I've made. So now I need to think, okay, actually, we're getting really good at making sure that websites are accessible. So, what do I need to think about next? And as I said, everything we've discussed should be updated in a playbook from the beginning. It should be a living, breathing document that sort of grows with you. And at the not at the end, but sort of what you want to get to is that it houses all your goals, the ones you've completed, the new goals that you're coming to, the roles and responsibilities from the accessibility lead and the champions and the team, and really understanding what everyone needs to do, your how to's on best practice. So, all of that learning, you can make sure that you're bullet pointing it somewhere and having that in some sort of playbook or program book. Um, Design system guidance, testing and QA, everything you're learning about all of these processes. And yes, that's how I've done it anyway. And I hope that you've all taken some insight. So thank you very much.